Welcome to the Let's Actuate podcast interview series, where we speak to leaders in VC, venture building, and future technologies, and we discuss the current state and trajectory of their domains. Let's dive in.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good evening to our fellow viewers, wherever you might be. We have Colton Cray joining us today for the Let's Actuate podcast. We're excited to have you.
Yes, very excited to have you. And he's an early stage investor with Litquidity Ventures. It's Litquidity. And he's also consulting with an emerging fund. It's got about 50 million focused on frontier technology in Texas. Welcome.
Thank you, Andrew, Chris. Appreciate you guys having me on today.
Yeah, same. Thanks for being here. I'm really excited for the conversation that we got in store. So there was a little poking around that I did right before. I actually checked out the Litquidity website and started digging around. I had checked you guys out before, but I noticed the second tab on the website got me really excited, and that is your merch tab.
I'm glad you like it. Yeah. Not to disappoint anybody, but the Litquidity brand is very much the brainchild of my investing partner, Hank Medina. And I'd say his name now because he had his full doxing episode with a certain publication that will not be named earlier this year. But he's the father of the Litquidity brand and everything that goes along with that. We started investing together about 2 years ago. And so regrettably, I can't take any credit for the merch. Funny story though, the way Hank and I actually met initially, or I guess our very first conversation, his best-selling product, I think, is these mugs and other office wear that says, "Please fix, thanks," which is, a callback to anybody who's worked in professional services and has gotten a trite, comment from a partner just, saying please fix, and they can't even write out the full word, but, God forbid you miss a period or something. Anyway, it's a great selling piece of equipment. I separately had a merch store that at the time that was also selling stuff with similar words on it, and nervous because Litquidity's brand was so much bigger than my own. I actually filed the trademark for "Please Fix, Thanks." Because I knew, not because I was trying to get him to shut it down or anything. I just didn't want him to shut me down. And so our very first conversation, a mutual friend introduced us and was like, "Hey, Hank, you meet Colton. He has the trademark for "Please Fix, Thanks." And Hank's like, "Dude, what the hell? Like, wait, what? Like, why?" And anyway, so fantastic start of our relationship. But that's more so a testament to how prolific his merch has been. It's a lot of cool. When I had my first investment banking job, I knew Litquidity was big because my MD had that same "Please Fix, Thanks" mug front and center on his desk.
That's pretty dope, and I love that it comes full circle now.
Yeah.
And we'll be sure to get links to the when we post this all. No affiliate. This is just what we do. So big shout out, and check out the merch. It's fantastic.
There's actually a really dope clothing company that we met that was doing merch for an event that was going on in Vegas. And I struck up a conversation. I was like, "Chris, how cool would it be to get a line going and just make dope swag?" Right? Like, we're doing cool stuff, but also dope swag.
Especially in our industry, man. It's like, Hilton, you've seen it. It's a lot of it is this drab Patagonia branded affiliate stuff. And I love Patagonia, but you walk into the Silicon Valley things like, 10 people in Patagonia raised 500 million. They aren't VCs. It's like, okay, cool.
I mean, your lips to God's ears. I mean, there's for people who are such contrarian thinkers, there's a lot of uniformity in the uniforms. Tomorrow morning, we're meeting with Andreessen Horowitz's marketing team to collab for the Tech Week swag. So it's going to be, they reached out to us saying, we want to do, let's have a collab on merch for this coming up. So super excited to see how that works. I have no idea what they have in mind, but Andreessen Horowitz is the kings of marketing in the VC game, and also very good operators. Very difficult thing to do at the same time. So we're excited to have that kind of brand recognition, and excited too.
asking about your merch and your sourcing and stuff kind of on that note. I don't think I want to anymore. Like that's a step up right there, man. Very cool. That's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, that's all, credit to Hank. He's got a very good system going. It's incredible. Like, I don't know if you guys, work. When I built my merch store, and I know this is way off topic from like my career, but I do think it's worth like talking about. When you're talking about building a brand and entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I during COVID, I was part of this, like, I don't know if you call it a drinking group or something, but we did these like mini TED Talks with my friends that were supposed to be called Keg Talks, and it was the idea is just everyone bring like a beer and hop on it. Someone can just present whatever topic they want, and most of them were absurd, very silly, weird things, but some of them were like instructional and fun. And one of them was like how to build a Shopify brand in less than 10 minutes. It's just how much time they had. And they literally walked through just using their email, setting up a Shopify store, like plugging in an integration for a company called Printful, and then how to design a shirt. And like before the end of their 10-minute slot, they had like built a store and then gone on the store, like entered their credit card information, like from URL, and ordered shirt that they designed on the call. And so they had it up and running in 10 minutes. So it is not hard to get a brand up and running. I mean, and they also put up, with a click of a button, they made it so shoes, mugs on a beautiful storefront. It's fascinating. So speaking of Shopify, I mean, they just absolutely decimated earnings this last week, and their moat is incredible. So really incredible platform there.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I will say, while there's an infrastructure right now where you could pull something like that off and establish that brand, that presence within 10 minutes, there's some creative flow that's got to go behind that to make that worthwhile, to connect though, right?
Yeah.
That's the silent part of things. It's like, what is engagement and community building and something that somebody can see themselves associating with? Where does that magic happen?
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. I mean, if we're ever going to, if you talk about memes, I mean, that's the very nature of memes, right? Is understanding sort of the zeitgeist and sort of what people want to align themselves with. What somebody wants to repost is similar to what they might want to wear as a brand on their own, shirt or something like that. And sort of being able to capture that narrative. And, what you post on Instagram is very similar to what you wear, in public, how you want to be viewed. And so that merch and, mimetic culture, I think, really go hand in hand in a lot of ways.
I love that. Let's take a step back. Let's take a few steps back. On the bottom of your career trajectory, and I love this. I have personal respect for this, but I want to hear how this evolution happened, and you chose to keep this there. But live stunt actor at Traildust Town to venture partner at Litquidity Ventures. Let's hear about this journey.
Yeah, I mean, look, the stunt man to VC pipeline remains strong. No, I don't think I'll ever take that off my resume. Partially because I did it at the time to keep it on there. I think, I think everybody should at some point in their life and career, some advice I might have for a student, if they haven't done this already, is do something just super interesting. Especially if you are trying to distinguish yourself in some way. Sometimes adding a little bit of, flavor can make you stand out. I can't tell you how many times that's been the first question during like a job interview has been like, wait, can we talk about this? And I'm like, usually I go into interviews now, or I did, back out of law school with a video queued up on my phone, like ready to show people like, okay, yeah, here's what it was all about. But I mean, look, I grew up acting. I was doing some child acting stuff as a kid, which is very, kind of funky. And I had enjoyed it until it became real. And I did like a real acting job for like a big professional theater company, and then kind of veered off of that path when I was like 15. And when it was coming time to kind of make a decision of moving to LA or not, or kind of continuing, finish high school and do other work. Mm-hmm. And I think I'd always missed, performative arts. And then in undergrad, I had just turned 21, and I suddenly found myself without as much pocket change as usual after living a very social life. And I was I was trying to find odd jobs to do before the holidays came up. We had a ton of family visiting, and I was like, I'm going to have to spend a lot of honest presents this year. And I was looking for odd jobs online, and I, help people move or something. I don't know. And I saw Stuntman Needed as a headline, and I was like, well, this can't be real. And I clicked on it, and I recognized the place, Traildust Town. It was this tacky, like, uh, Wild West kind of tourist area down back where I'd grown up in Tucson, Arizona. And I was like, wait, that sounds amazing. I was like, I get to like get paid to like act again, and I get to be outside running around and exercising. I was like very low pressure. I was like, you know what, this is going to be a fun summer job. So I think it was after my sophomore year. I think some kids were running off to do internships, and I went and learned how to shoot blank guns and load and jump through explosions and do fist fights and
so cool.
falls for kids. And I got very good at gun spinning. If you've ever seen the movie Tombstone, I can do a whole like gun spinning routine still probably. But anyway, did that for about 6 months. Super fun college job. Eventually, went back to my studies full time. But yeah, no regrets there. It was a ton of fun. It was a blast, as they say in the biz.
For the people who don't do any martial arts, dancing, or stunt coordination, the number of beats you have to learn like in the moment. If they're like, oh, I need to learn like 10 beats, and people are like, oh, only 10 beats. I don't think you understand how many moves can, like, how hard that actually is. And to hear like someone like Conor McGregor, he did that movie not too long ago, and he's like doing 30 beat sequences like on the fly, and you're like,
Wild.
Yeah, I mean, memorization is a skill in and of itself, and it was a really cool art to learn, and even though it was kind of this hole in the wall place, it was cool to be with some like people who really loved it as a craft. I mean, they really enjoyed like putting stunts together, and to learn like how you could do. I do think there were some lessons I learned even from that small job about how to do something very dramatic and difficult by doing things one step at a time. I mean, you don't walk up to the hardest stunt or the most dangerous one is like a 20-foot ladder stunt where you climb to the top of this ladder. There's this little fight sequence at the top, and you fall off the ladder and you fall into like a little mattress, and that's hidden behind a little stage thing, and then you kind of roll off of it. But you don't fall off a 20-foot ladder on day one. What you do is you climb up one rung of the ladder and you fall back onto it. And then when you're comfortable, you climb up to the second rung and you fall off that. And you slowly fall off each one, going up one step at a time until you fall down, until you're ready to go off the 20-foot one. And then it looks very, impressive for showtime, which is, obviously analogous to a lot of things in life. But, it's funny that you mentioned the difficulty in planning those things, because in all my time at the stunt show, people always ask like, oh, did you get hurt? Or like, did people get hurt all the time? And the answer is no. I mean, everyone was super professional. We rehearsed things. We had, debriefs. You had to get certified to load the guns and do all this other stuff. But where people did get hurt was walking on and off stage, props falling backstage, people missing their footing, like getting into like position before the show. It was always when you weren't paying attention, and it was the smallest thing. The most common injury of all was running off stage and twisting your ankle, like running from the sand into the like backstage like area. It was just when you were not paying attention that people got hurt. So there's an analogy in there too about risk and covering yourself. But it was interesting that no one ever got hurt doing actual stunts.
Yeah, that makes sense, because you're going through that coordination all the time, so you have a honed focus for probably every single moment of that, except for the in-between when your unconscious kicks in.
Yeah. And shout out, while we're on, to the Pinnacle Peak Pistoleros in Tucson, Arizona. If you find yourself in East Tucson, go hit up Traildust Town, Pinnacle Peak, get yourself a steak at the steakhouse, and go buy a wooden nickel and watch the show. So tell Heather and Jerry that Colton sent you.
Well, we'll be sure to make it out there.
Yeah. And we'll give them a shout out on your behalf as well. We'll drop the link there so it's easier for people to find.
They're gonna be
too.
very confused about where this traffic is coming from.
Yep. You know what, it is what it is. I think they were confused by my presence as it was. It was very much a fun part-time college job for me.
Yeah. So you lined up, and then you ended up finishing your studies and ending up in law, corporate law.
Yeah.
Was that where you imagined going from the beginning? Was that the plan along, or was that the path that paved itself?
I mean, Andrew, not at all. I mean, it was, my law school application essay was titled, "I don't want to be a lawyer."
I love it.
I went sort of, I think a lot of people who are in law, should be there. I think they need to be. I think a lot of people who apply, though, probably shouldn't. And I think there's a number of factors that make it worth going to law school. I think I had a very unique set of circumstances that made it worth going, and I have no regrets over it. But it certainly wasn't. I definitely was not on a traditional path into law, or certainly like into venture. But I made it work. I went into undergrad not knowing. I went into undergrad out at Harvard. Harvard of the Southwest. Some people know it as University of Arizona, and was a quadruple major out there, which I think sounds more impressive on paper than when it was in person. I think I wanted to do anything and everything. I came from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad had just always grown up watching him do real estate deals and owning local businesses, and always wanted to do follow in his footsteps and be an entrepreneur of sorts and an investor as well. And but didn't really see the path to that straight from undergrad. So I kind of had my hand in everything in the business school. So I majored in management operation systems, or management information systems, and I realized I wasn't going to be like a database engineer. And then I had some colleagues of mine who were going into M&A and private equity, and that looks challenging. And they look kind of like generalists who are going to be able to do a lot of different things in industry, but still get exposure to deal making and corporate governance at a high level, which seemed the right path to me, not being a technologist. And so I added finance as a major. And then I was like, well, maybe if I'm going to be a founder one day, I need to learn how to run things. So I added operations as a major. And then my last year, I was invited to join the entrepreneurship program. So just added that as a major. Somewhere in the between, I studied abroad in India. My friends and I founded a wine company. And it sounds, I think, very impressive on paper, and maybe it did for my law school applications, but I think in reality, I didn't know what I was going to do with any of this. I was lucky enough to have an advisor of mine. I was doing a internship at a private equity fund from a guy who'd been a former big law attorney, and said, Colton, this is what you're good at, and is kind of the things that I was good at test taking, and had good writing style, had great grades, and kind of unique positioning from undergrads. And he's like, this is a back door if you want to get into the world of like private investing and deal making. You could go to law. And I started looking around at I think lawyers are derided a lot in the founder and VC community, because I think there is sort of the an ethos about them that is stodgy and very risk averse, not contrarian thinking. They're just there for the transaction, not the substance, which I think are fair, archetypes to draw based on the nature of the work. But any realistic view at sort of the landscape of premier VCs and founders finds lawyers everywhere. Because for all the lawyer jokes out there, there's still just a lot of smart people in law, and they know how to mitigate risk and how to approach certain problem sets in a very effective way. And so, and I just saw that the ensemble veterans of the VC and founder community were a lot of lawyers and people I admired. And so applied to law school, wrote my essay. I don't, about not wanting to be a lawyer, but I wrote about how I don't want to be a lawyer long term, but I probably would make sense for me to go to a big law firm, not knowing what else I'm going to do, and work on high level M&A, at a big firm for 2 to 3 years. And then if I'm going to ultimately be an investor or something else, at least get a year of finance work in there, learn how to financially model and sort of learn the operational end, and then get into the startup world again. So that's exactly what happened. So I applied to a number of schools. Some of them found that case compelling. I ended up going to USC out in LA, and really enjoyed my time in law. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship that sort of facilitated my first job at a law firm called Skadden Arps. Worked out of Skadden for 3 years in LA doing M&A, capital markets, and corporate governance. And I was on a pretty small team, and so got to get some high exposure, some really high profile work, which is really helpful, I think, for building a sort of skill set that focused on things that are important for big law firms as they are for startups. Attention to detail, obsessive client service. Leaving no stone unturned, but quick, efficient, thorough communications, and kind of understanding how business interests. We always would say our clients don't have legal problems; they have business problems, and law needs to solve that. And so I think having that mindset allowed me to be very comfortable with exiting eventually into an adjacent industry, into banking. I knew I wanted to get that under my belt, so did a year at Houlihan Lokey, and then that was during COVID, which was very much a challenge to do that. To do these kind of white shoe professional services, careers remotely. And then after that, in 2021, is when I started going full time into investing and early stage operating.
I love that. Thank you for the visibility on the trajectory.
Yeah,
I find it interesting how we started from the practice of the step-by-step so that you have the illusion of effortlessness because of the consistency, and kind of through this exploration you had that one focus that you found through all of that, right? And it seems that it's all come together in a really nice way. What are some of the superpowers would you say that you have because of this intentional and unintentional path that you took?
Good question. I think emphasis on the unintentional. I think that there are people much wiser than me who have written about the efficacy of or wisdom in having systems instead of goals, and I think that I'm a product of that. Like, I don't know exactly where I'm going to be in 10 years, but I think I am going to be very pleased with wherever it is, because I kind of have my decision making framework is a system that puts me in places that I enjoy, and I think that what are superpowers? I would think a risk, not tolerance is the wrong phrase, but I think a risk respect might be the right phrase for it. I respect risk, and I am able to sort of embrace it and pursue it to an extent, but also I think in a way that where I'm able to protect my downside in a lot of ways. I think that's a quality I look for in founders is their respect for risk, and that's not that's to contrast founders from like lawyers who are extremely risk averse and I don't think have a lot of they have an obsession with risk or a fear of it rather than respect. And I'm not sure if that's a superpower, but it certainly allowed me to make some decisions since I left Big Law that have put me in a very like I said, enjoyable position. I like what I'm doing now so much. I knew this is kind of where I would end up. I hoped it would be something like this. I couldn't have predicted it exactly, the firm name or the deals that we're working on. But I think, the chickens are coming to roost in some ways. I have, friends who have stayed the course and are, getting to senior positions in Big Law, are beginning to ask those questions for the first time. Like, should I have done something different? Like what would I do now if I exited, and they have golden handcuffs now. It's hard when you're an 8th year associate making $600,000 at some places to try and think about taking a cut. We were very close to the holy grail of a big law job or a big law partnership, and I think it's Mark Zuckerberg who talked about the biggest risk of all is not taking a risk, or playing it safe is the biggest risk, because then you're stuck. And I think it's a thinly veiled critique for how much brain power and how much talent goes into professional services, that I think is could be well spent and create a lot of value in the startup community, or at least in the entrepreneurship community. But risk meeting talent is a rare nexus that usually can result in outsized returns.
I think with that, one of the questions that comes up pretty often is, especially in the VC community, we use the word risk, and there are formal definitions. There are the MBAs who come out of school and be like, here's my risk analysis. But when you get down to it, what is risk to you, right? Because like Andrew and I are in space. There's most MBAs are like, no, don't touch it, right? Too risky. What does that mean? We still have portcos. They're cracking. They're making traction. Things are still gonna do pretty well on the IRR, right? So, what are you defining as risk, basically, and where are you having this kind of healthy measure of it that you're looking for in your investments?
I mean, like you said, there's academic definitions of risk. There's quantitative analysis, and if you understand it quantitatively, you can go make $1 billion, working for Jane Street, or doing commodities trading or something like that. But I think the way we're thinking about it from an entrepreneurial perspective is risk is a propensity for failure, and to yield outsized results one way or another. I think it's sort of increasing the depth of like a standard deviation towards sort of tail end results one way or another. If risk equals reward, it is changing the odds of how likely you're going to get outsized returns, and sort of understanding your own propensity within that, and being comfortable with the possibility of failure. And I think where it comes in from the entrepreneurship perspective is your confidence and ability to make that bet on the inputs you can control, which is you and your own ability to just deliver results. And if not now, to get another swing at the bat, and to not be to let that get you down. I think that too, that tolerance. I think if anybody looked at the numbers objectively, I'm not the first investor or VC or entrepreneur to say this. When you look at the numbers objectively, it is not the bet worth making. In most cases, it is, the propensity for failure is extremely high for how much work and sacrifice it takes a founder to put in. But I think that sort of, that maniacal self-belief is what it takes, to win. And so there is a bit of delusion. I think there's a delusion factor. If I was, putting together a profile for what, a founder's own approach to risk look like, I think part of it would be a little bit of delusion. Even if they don't have an accurate representation of what the risk looks like, they just believe I can't fail, even though there may be an odds that they can. I think that having that confidence is necessary to winning. I was just talking about this with somebody too about the Olympics, walking up how each of these people has to be confident they're going to win gold. And they might be wrong. In fact, all but one person is wrong. But I can guarantee you that they're not going to win gold if they don't think they are. And I think it's similar with founders. They may be wrong, and odds say they are. But, I think having that, like I said, maniacal comfortability with risk, saddling up anyway, as John Wayne would say, being terrified of saddling up anyway, is sort of the way I approach it. So it's probably a much more long-winded answer than you were looking for, but and I don't mean to wax too poetic about it. I'm sure some MBA, like you said, has can hit me with a response, but that's how I think about it.
Now, with that being said, within the sphere of risk, we've talked about different investments that we kind of make. Each VC, every firm has their focus, their thesis. What are you focusing on right now?
Sure. Are you are you looking for, mostly like just thesis around like, size and vertical, or
Size, vertical, your bent, your bias, right?
yeah.
Level of delusion.
Yeah.
um, and don't get me wrong, there's a level of delusion too that I can't wrap my mind around. But look, investment, thesis wise, it's worth noting, Litquidity Ventures is a investing syndicate that's driven from the Litquidity brand. So our investing decisions right now are largely appetite driven. So we get a lot of inbound, more than we could, invest in, but we have to, tailor what we present, what we decide to invest in, because ultimately we present it to our investors. We do due diligence, we get to meet the founders, and we, write a memo, prepare a bunch of materials, and then ultimately have to, we can only present something that we can sell on the front page of an email to our investors. If it doesn't catch their eye immediately, it's difficult. And so, as you can imagine, given the threshold for a lot of folks, so this isn't an investment committee where they have very strict guidelines, but the guidelines is what they like and what they know and understand. So that leads us towards a lot of consumer, a lot of retail, e-commerce, a lot of professional services, given the connection to Liquidity's base, I guess, audience. But we've done some AI level enterprise work. I think as we've gotten bigger and more sophisticated, as our investors have come to trust us more, we've been able to expand our purview a bit, and find and align ourselves with those LPs who are more aligned with us on a thesis perspective and are interested in the opportunities we see. So, I have, living in LA and sort of being near El Segundo and SpaceX, have had the opportunity to explore a lot of sort of, frontier tech is what I call it. And that's kind of a confluence of deep tech, of hard tech, aerospace and defense, applied sciences, additive manufacturing. There's a lot of things that sort of, fit within that purview. I'd say it's kind of akin to American dynamism, the term that Andreessen Horowitz coined with David Ulevich and Catherine Boyle. I've really followed their thesis in a big way, which I think also encompasses some, difficult industries that are, staples of the American economy. So that could be healthcare, education, insurance, things that are heavily regulated. But, we saw, sort of the triarchy of SpaceX, Anduril, and Palantir be able to penetrate defense and spending. And it can be done, with the right level of work. I think that over the last year, I kind of came in on the tail end of that hype cycle around, defense and aerospace. But, there's still a lot of talent there. And I think, talent and ambition are ultimately going to win in this space. So, to answer your question, more directly, we're agnostic when it comes to vertical and stage. I think we focus on early stage, seed to Series A. But we're opportunistic. I think that with the interest rate environment where it's at, and with sky high valuations coming down, and a new focus on cash flow, there's a lot of growth stage companies that need infusions at desirable multiples. And I think that there are certain funds that invested, or certain vintages that finish off their investment in growth stage companies that were overvalued in 2020 that are coming due. Their maturity dates are coming up and they need liquidity. And so I think people are going to be selling. I shouldn't say I think. I'm very well aware there are groups selling large blocks of highly valued stocks in the growth companies of the world, the Stripes, the Andurils, the SpaceXs. People need liquidity. And so there's a very robust, secondary thesis there if you can make it work, which we've been dabbling pretty strongly in recently. So I say that to sort of highlight two ends of the spectrum. I mean, there's opportunistic ways to make money, in the growth market. People's greed or sort of the interest rate environment from the early 2020s is having some downstream effects that people are able to take care of now. But on the earlier stage, I think what we look for is founders, like I said, who are leading transformational technologies. I think founders who understand their space and their customer extremely, extremely well. And you have demonstrated track record of excellence. I think as I've gotten interested in the frontier space, like I said, it's hard to explain all some of these investment criteria in a one page email. So it really requires a lot of focus to sort of sell this to our syndicate. whether that's any additive manufacturing and like explaining to folks why this new 3D printing process is actually revolutionary, or why this aerospace company is different. There's a lot of space companies out there that we look at. So I think that right now, a big criteria for us specifically, to making an investment decision is serious traction in a product, and especially product-led traction. Are people willing to pay for this? I think that question is more difficult to answer now than it was sort of at the SaaS peak in 2015. And I think in aerospace and defense, there's a lot of red herrings, especially that make companies look desirable. I think it's easy to get some like fake test customers at first. And there are ways to get a lot of like funding from the government and show numbers on a piece of paper, but recurring orders and ability to sell to government, I think, is a difficult challenge. So I mentioned looking for founders who really understand their customer, and I think that is especially acute in deep tech and in defense, because a lot of people don't understand the government. I mean, the biggest I think talent gap we're seeing in the space is not having a very unified sales strategy from the beginning. Like, we'll figure that out later. Let's just master the tech right now. There's a lot of tech that can, that's not enough for the government. You have to have a lobbying program. You have to understand this stuff inherently. And you look at a company like Anduril, and they wrote the book on this. They started with that as a fundamental pillar, is the sales process and how to get in with the government. They planted those seeds early. It can't be an afterthought. And I think that is similar. I think those are the kind of founders we would look for in adjacent spaces, like I said, that are selling to highly entrenched industries. So whether that's education or healthcare, somebody who really knows how to get this into the hands of folks and drive sales is very important. So yeah, I think you're seeing this a lot of investors where they're investing in deep tech and hard tech, but while you might think that implies that you're making an investment where the technical risk is higher than the market risk, that may be the case, that it's higher. But I think that having a balance of the two, and sort of just because the technical risk is higher doesn't mean you can't rule out the market risk, even if it's challenging. So I think that going in very sober, and I think it is important. And I think choosing partners to invest with who can be a real value add is wildly important. So we look for a lead investor who has done this, who can do it. There's a number of really, really talented VCs and other incubation groups out there who can help. And we look for that as a big positive signal for founders. So anyway, it's probably again more than you asked for, but that's how I'm thinking about it.
This is beautiful.
This is what the audience loves.
Yes, 100%. And it's these insights and the stuff that's said between the stuff that's perceived as said, where the value lies. And one of those things that you kind of touched on a little bit is like navigating, understanding a problem space, understanding how to align solutions with the customers, understanding the customers deep enough where that alignment just naturally occurs, but also understanding the sales cycles. And the one thing that was unsaid is building those relationships, fostering that social ecosystem that's required to make anything happen, especially the big hairy problem spaces with stakeholders where things move slow, where risk is inherent and everything is looked at with a fine-tooth comb through 3 different regulatory or compliance lenses. So one thing that we've noticed as well is the individuals and the groups that start with that relationship building, that start with like really understanding the ecosystem at large and understanding how to add value to it and identify where they fit into it, and figure out how to solve within the problem spaces and the in-betweens there, are the ones that see the most traction, that get the furthest along, where it almost seems too good to be true. And it almost seems like you were saying at the very beginning, it seems effortless, but it's because they've been going step by step and falling back each step and practicing that over and over and building relationships the entire way.
Yeah. I mean, I think I think that defense tech is for those of us who like watching things blow up, it's a very cool, industry to be in. It's cool to see, the vibe shift. I say defense kind of hand in hand with aerospace, because a lot of, the sort of rocketry that we've seen come out, a lot of stuff that's sort of, in the wake of SpaceX, is fueling a lot of this. But, at the end of the day, these are still companies, and you can't ignore the customer. And I think that is anathema to young founders who are maybe still playing by the Silicon Valley rule book. Or maybe they've read too many things about product-led growth, and they believe if you build it, they will come. Well, that's not the case in the government at all. Just because you build it does not mean they're going to come. And it's I think one of my favorite companies in the space out of El Segundo, I'm not an investor in them at all, is Castellion. And they're building hypersonic missiles. They're backed by Andreessen Horowitz, and their founders, I'm good friends with one of them, were former SpaceX guys, but non-technical. In fact, one of the founders who I'm friends with was on the comms. But that's because the reason they were led to Castellion or to found it was because there was a mandate from the government around these this sort of munitions thesis to keep track with China, and they knew SpaceX wasn't going to take it up, but they were close in, and they knew, look, there is already a latent demand for this. There is a business ready to go. The technology exists. China's built hypersonic missiles. We can do it. We can gather that talent. That sort of mandate-driven entrepreneurship is I think lost on a lot of folks today who believe I have this revolutionary technology that maybe is really great for a technologist who's a Stanford grad and is super familiar with things, but does that mean it's going to make any money? I don't know. Michael Dell talks about is a very big fan of people staying in college, even though he dropped out. But he likes to sort of, I think, sometimes speak on the other end of the Teal Fellowship program is stay in school. Don't quit unless you should. And he's like, people think I left to go think of Dell computers. He goes, I left because I was building computers out of my dorm room and making $600,000 a year. I had to quit. The company was already working, and so unless there's the mandate is truly there, it's very hard. I think founders who are late to the hype cycle are going to be very difficult to sell equity, in their companies without a clear cut, strategy towards sales and growth, because it is already so competitive. I mean, Anduril is so hyped up as it is. They just raised a $14 billion valuation. They're still tiny compared to the primes. I think their traction is incredible. It's one of my favorite companies in the entire world. But I think if people think that Anduril is a crack in the dam and that there's room for a bunch of people now, they are sadly mistaken at what it takes to compete in this space. So there's a lot of smart people at Lockheed and Raytheon and other places. There's a lot of inertia there as well, which hopefully this is able to break some of that up. But my advice, I think, to founders is, even if you're selling to the government, like, knowing who your customer is the lifeblood of your company.
100%. And I don't know if you know this about Chris and I, but we're product people first and foremost. So it's interesting because the way that I hear you speak about product-led growth is what you might hear on the surface level. People absorb and they're like, oh, I understand it, like build something. But it is that deeper work. It is understanding and observing a problem space and solving for it. So there's almost like the self-reflection and self-awareness side of things, but you need situational awareness.
Yeah. Well, and don't get me wrong. Like, obviously, there's also the product-led vision is what makes exceptional founders, is the ability to marry the two. Is, it was Henry Ford said, if I just built what everyone wanted, they would have asked for faster horses. Yeah. And, he was like, there's a better product here. What the real problem is transportation, reliability, and getting somewhere. So when I say understanding your customer, it actually is a product-led, idea. I think Notion is one of the best examples of this. I don't think you could have described the product of Notion very well. And I have, I'm an obsessive Notion user. I think it's a problem. But I put my, fiance and my entire, wedding planning process is on Notion. Everything I do is there, and every grocery list is in there. And I wasn't investing by the time they were first raising, but my understanding is that the founders, initial pitch was walking through the history of paper and what writing on things meant and why people did what they did. And so kind of, having a first principles approach to product and to customers, and like, why do we record things? What do we actually need to do day to day? Understanding the confluence of a checklist and a progress task sheet and a calendar and a file repository and a notes place are all the same thing. It was a very visionary way to do this. And in Notion, I think is one of the best cases of product-led growth, where they don't need to advertise, because somebody sends you a Notion page one time. At least that's how it happened to me. And I was like, okay, I have to work in this for this project. And then so, well, I guess I'll use it for this other one. And then I wonder if I can add this feature. And then it was all there before I thought of it. So, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, it's not product led, growth. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I think you get a lot of engineers in really, really talented people out of SpaceX and other places who have a really cool project, and they, maybe don't have the other things required in this specific space. That alone is not going to make a successful company, and not thinking about it, could be a death toll.
100%. And when you were speaking about it, I heard it through your words. I think I was speaking to the individuals who I've seen fall in love with an idea, instead of falling in love with a problem. Understanding that underlying reasoning that's driving people to do or not do something in a particular way.
And the engineers who over-index on building just the product, it's like, I'm going to be in stealth for 6 months. Not going to do it. It's like, I need to be heads down. I'm going to stop going to events. It's like, look, you should you want to build your company, you have to get out there. And if you're not talking to people about what you're building, I can't trust that what you're building is actually relevant to the customer.
A thesis that I guess an archetype I would love, to your point, Chris, I would love a founder who's like, I had this, problem set, even if they're an engineer. So you know what, I became a BDR for a competitor or something like that. I became a business development rep in the space, so I could talk to these people every day and learn about it. And while I was building in stealth, I literally formed my professional pursuit around like learning how to sell to these people, and understanding their problems, rather than, like you said, just building in stealth for 6 months. I don't know when that became a badge of honor for people, but it doesn't, I don't know, impress me a ton. I like the building out in the open. I think it's a false signal in some ways. It could make sense. It probably does in a lot of sense in a lot of ways, but I agree with you. Like, getting out there and understanding the problem. I understand, once you're like Series A, maybe not going to, or even like at seed stage, like just focused on finding product market fit. You've established your customers, who they are. Now you need to figure out if it works. Maybe that's when you stop doing a bunch of podcasts. Maybe that's when you stop doing, your press releases, and you just focus on building out the product really, really well. And then, once you have product market fit, then you hire a bunch of salespeople. I mean, there's levels to this that you should, be at, and there's a time for the hype cycle, as you're about to raise funds and whatnot. But I think that in the early stages, when you're trying to do proof of concept, not being problem focused first and being out there is not the time to do it.
Yep. And even when you go heads down in that seed stage, right? And I think it's implied in what you said, you're directly plugged in with the source of information that you need, as opposed to like just staying stealth, locked in your room and not surfacing what you're doing and validating what you're doing. Yeah.
I think that's, part of I think that's kind of crumbling with some of the mystique around, the Silicon Valley, South Park Commons kind of like, oh, there's this mystique behind what I'm doing. It's very confidential. No one can know. I'm building this big thing. Because, if you're not out in the open. You're not accountable to anything. Nobody can like judge you. I think of those scenes from the show Silicon Valley about don't show revenue, like, because then everyone knows like there's revenue. The idea of hiding yourself. But I think that show is meant to satirize some of this stuff, and I hope with valuations coming down to earth and with the decentralization of Silicon Valley as the hub, I don't think Silicon Valley personally will ever be dethroned from being the head of tech as long as the Mag 7 are still there. I think that hopefully some of the culture, I think, becomes a little more approachable and a little bit more honest, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. And I think we're starting to see that, right? The shift toward transparency, shift toward the desire to collaborate and kind of get that energy to pop up in different places. At least we're observing it. There are a lot of physical locations, geographies here, even in the States, that are kind of working toward some of these initiatives. So I'm pretty excited about it. And the trend that we're on and the shift that we're in the midst of, because when you mentioned, even when it comes to like the space and deep tech hype cycle, maybe coming to a slow, Chris and I are getting super excited. And I don't know if it's because we have insider info or an insider perspective or something, but now the real work starts. Now the really exciting stuff is starting to surface, because all those companies, those founders, those problem spaces that have been being worked on for the past few years, now those are starting to really pick up their momentum, and we're starting to see the actual wave.
Yeah, I think that we are on the cusp of an incredible vintage. I think that this is the best time to be an investor. I've never been more bullish on the space. I think some of this aerospace stuff is I'm very bullish on aerospace generally. I think that as somebody who literally lives within eyesight of Starship, which is where I am right now at Starbase, I am skeptical about any company that's reliant on the SpaceX economy. SpaceX is one company, and I think there's a lot of other adjoining projects and things that people can do. But again, it's like you said, it's about understanding the problem set in a really sophisticated way, and not just building a cool sci-fi company for the sake of a sci-fi company.
Exactly. Well, the infrastructure is in place now, right? So
yeah, exactly.
The skeleton of the infrastructure is in place. Now the foundation and the rest of the infrastructure goes into place. So there's going to be an entire economy that's built on top of that, both on orbit but also on Earth with these future technologies. I do got a question for you that Chris sent in the chat. You've mentioned kind of this frontier technology. You've mentioned hard tech. You've mentioned deep tech. We say deep tech. We've seen a couple of VC firms say deep tech, and it just encompasses aerospace too. And we lean into the ambiguity as well. But what does deep tech mean to you?
Yeah, I think deep tech, and I tried to refer to this earlier. I'm going to be a subscriber. I think words are what they are understood to mean. Common parlance. Look, I come from law. A lot of people I work with come from engineering backgrounds, and we know that acronyms keep the masses dumb and the salaries high. At least that's what I heard at one point growing up. But I think people know what you mean usually when you say deep tech. I like the term frontier tech because it sort of encompasses a lot of these, and it implies pushing the edge of technology. When I hear deep tech, when I hear hard tech, I usually assume some kind of hardware element. So when I hear deep tech, I think it is where, very simply put, it's where the technical risk outweighs the market risk. At least ostensibly as a rule, we just talked to how this is impossible in actuality, but if you build it, they will come. So, at some point, building an airplane was deep tech. Like, if you can build this new frontier, if you can push this new technology, it will happen, And so, for the most part, SaaS falls squarely outside of this. I think, AI applications fall squarely outside of this. There's some industries that almost always always fit into deep tech, but you might still categorize them something different. So an example would be, big pharma is they are trying to find new solutions. If they can find a cure for X disease, the market is built in. It will work. And so, I think pharma is there. I think aerospace and defense is almost always there. It encompasses, critical infrastructure, and energy a lot of times. So nuclear is a big, exciting part on that. That's having a renaissance right now, and is very exciting to be a part of. But I wouldn't consider, to distinguish, I wouldn't consider pharma part of hard tech. I think hard tech too can encompass more, consumer driven options too. Yep. So I think that, consumer like applications can be part of that. I think applied materials or additive manufacturing can be, part of that. Yeah, and I think deep tech too. The other element that distinguishes deep tech can include, software and deep design work. So, the AI pushing limits of LLMs and what's going on in Google Brain and some of these other think tanks. I would consider that still within the deep tank, deep tech think tank. So that's how I think about it. I'm sure that there's people smarter than me who would fight me on it, but I don't think any investor or any startup that's looking for money is going to belabor me for, misusing the term.
Oh, no. And I was just interested because I think everybody's got their slightly similar, slightly familiar to them understanding of the world. Like you said, it is what you said it so eloquently. Words mean what
they're understood to mean.
What they're understood to mean. Thank you.
And so I think, where it gets hazy is I don't think a lot of these defense plays are necessarily deep tech. I don't think Anduril is really a deep tech company. I think that their software, I think Lattice, may have been at one point. I think that's really the underlying value add of theirs, but they're a platform at the end of the day. I believe, Anduril is a platform. Like their most successful operations have been, I think, M&A deals, for the Fury program, for their submersibles, that they're able to, put onto their application layer or onto their operating system. And but they didn't invent submarines, they didn't invent drones. They have incredible innovation and market innovation. So that's why I feel like companies want to be the next Anduril, and I'm like, you're inventing something. A lot of these companies, I think they might be good acquisition targets for Anduril. But Anduril is not out there necessarily being the first ones to create the brand new tech that they're being able to sell very well and to add on to their system. I think it's a brilliant company, which I think is going to make it in the long term. But I think that people's understanding of what they have done and how they did it is a little bit misguided and often lead them to thinking they can recreate it by creating a faster drone, creating a cooler surveillance camera or something. But it's a lot more banal than that, I think.
It certainly wasn't the car that Henry Ford mastered. There were a lot of other cars at the time.
Yeah, so. It's the manufacturing process, right? And the marketing process. And so, and that also gives me hope too, to use that example, like a lot of aerospace companies, just because there's a hype cycle, like usually means there's going to be a couple winners at the end. At the end of the oil rush, you had Standard Oil. At the end of the dot-com boom, you had Amazon and you had Google and or the dot-com bust. You're going to find the winners in there. And, the qualities that make them winners are not, super easy to spot right away. They're probably not raising the most money. They're probably not the most glamorous, but they have certain principles that distinguish them. I'm reading a great book right now about about the wireless spectrum giveaways of the 80s when wireless came online, and how the FCC kind of distributed who would get licenses. And it is a insane story about M&A and the government having this ultra valuable product that nobody knew how to value and how to give it away fairly. But then also how every time they tried to figure out something, the amount of entrepreneurship that went into scamming, or gaming is a better way to put it. Gaming people's chances to get it was amazing. But, throughout all of it, at the end of the day, our cell phones work today. And they work very well, actually. And it's actually the book, while as much of it, you kind of got this theme of it was just chaos and bad ideas and just everyone kind of scrambling, people doing M&A like deals with 60 parties to like unite structures and towers, and that they scrambled that overnight, but it worked. And like actually the solution was actually very beautiful. It was actually a very interesting example of how like all the goods and services and rights did flow to the people most able to service them. And you know what? A bunch of people did get rich along the way, who were little guys, who had a fair shot. And there was some collateral damage for sure, but it's, you know, an example of how, you know, out of this chaos and, you know, competition for something, even if it's hype at the time and everyone's getting in on it, you know, there's that still represents, you know, opportunity for people to come up to the top. You know, Peter Thiel talks about avoiding competition, and that may be the case, but I believe that some of the best founders are just born for it. They are ready to be in that arena and get bloody, and I think that's how, you know, John Rockefeller was, and a number of others. And I would not be, you know, surprised if, you know, despite the hype cycle, there are some of the best, you know, generational founders, you know, we've ever seen coming out of the aerospace and defense cycles right now.
I'm pretty excited to see what comes out of this, because I think we're going to see some of the most foundational and interesting stuff, and it's probably going to be a little bit beyond what we expect. We might have an assumption, we might have an inkling on the direction that things are going to take, but the pivots and the evolutions that always happen, it's really kind of a beautiful metamorphosis, right, from times like these. So pretty stoked for that. I had a question before we kind of get into our closing, which you gave some nuggets. By the way, I want to surface something real quick. You dropped gold earlier when you're like, one thing that you would be really interested in is somebody that is observing a problem space and they're like, hey, I want to go work for a company where I can consistently interface with people that are dealing with this problem or in this problem space to get feedback and really define what a solution might look like. Write that down, please. grab a pen, plant a seed. When you can get plugged in like that and that deep, where you just have a consistent flow of perspective and feedback, you could literally solve any problem that there is out there.
No, I think, you know, I would love I would love to meet, you know, like I think my dream investor, like founder duo is, you know, two folks at a company. One guy is on the technical team, one guy who's on the sales team, both of whom are just obsessed with this problem. One guy from the engineering angle, and, you know, another guy from the sales angle, and just who have a novel solution to it. I think that's kind of what we look for. You know, I mentioned the Castellian guys earlier. Like I said, they understood rocketry enough to bring on the talent, and I think that's a pretty close approximation for the kind of founders we look for. So
that's actually what resulted in some of the stuff that we have not talked about yet, that is sitting ambiguously on our pitch deck for the internal ventures that we have in the pipeline. Internal perspective. We just know some problems that need to go be solved. So we're going to build the stuff to solve it, but we'll be looking for some of that same criteria, right? The people that can really innately put their ear to the ground to understand what the tremors are actually saying. The question that I had for you, just to kind of pivot, and maybe not so much, and we might just dip back into the conversation that we were just in, but what are some of the things that you're excited about right now? Wherever you want to take this, what are some of the things that you're excited about in life?
I think that, you know, we're lucky to be in a profession that asks you to see the future. And I think being able to see the future, you know, requires you to see the present very well, and to understand where things are going, and to understand narrative and trends and where you are in a certain story. And I think understanding that allows you to, you know, identify alpha and take advantage of it. So, you know, call it an investment thesis, call it a theme. You know, I think right now something I'm excited about is a theme I'm kind of focused on called a flight to authenticity. I need to think of a sexier name for it, but, you know, I think there's a big, you know, hard tech in industry, or this return to hard tech as a desirable category, I think is sort of a leading indicator for you know, consumer tech as well. You know, we saw this a little bit, you know, with the advent of microprocessors and, you know, missile systems, munitions. You know, it's funny that these are the things that are popular now. NVIDIA and, you know, munition systems and rockets are popular now. The very first venture capital deals were done, you know, around Intel and these other chips that were made, that were, whose first customers were the Department of Defense. It's literally a return to the very origins of venture capital with Arthur Rock was done on these kinds of deals. And, I think that ushered in, the microchips that were made for munition systems, ushered in the wave of consumer microchips that fed into sort of, the Japanese consumer products that flooded the market. And we saw this big boom in consumer tech. And so, I don't think history repeats itself, but I think it does rhyme. And I think that we are on the verge of a return to this as a class. I think we're seeing attempts at it, people who are in the arena trying things, Rabbit R1 is a good example, and the Humane Pin, and now this Friend device. I think I had opportunities to invest in a couple of those and turned them down because I don't think the use case is there, but I think that somebody else will figure this out. I don't know that people want to replace the iPhone, and I don't think the iPhone's going anywhere. I think it is the single greatest consumer machine ever created, and I think it will be for a very long time. But I think that there are other things that people like to do that can benefit from that kind of tech. And I think that social and other consumer web devices haven't had a big impact in many years. And I think that there are trends we're seeing that are being, when I say a flight to authenticity, that are sort of a product of this like post crypto hangover that I think a lot of people have from COVID. I think people were locked in their houses for a long time. There was a lot of information wars, a lot of things that were caused people to doubt what was true and what wasn't during COVID. I think crypto too kind of took a lot of people out about why are we building tech that's a solution in need of a problem, I think was the phrase that was used a lot. Not speaking towards the viability of Bitcoin as an asset class, but all these other crypto things that a lot of people saw fortunes won and lost. And I think too, the advent of like fake news and people seeing something like the Twitter files, and Elon Musk's takeover of X, become alarmingly true, that there was a lot of, misinformation being dealt, from the hands of the government. And I think that people are in this, a sort of bitter hangover. And while, people say that online that, we're more divided than ever. Yeah, I don't think so. I think, we had a civil war at one point where people were a little bit more divided, but I think that they may be the most pessimistic and most, skeptical that we've ever been. And I think that people, now that the dark sides, the side effects of social media everyone's very well aware of it. Teens today say they wish TikTok had never been invented, but they also can't get off of it. There's a lot of social reasons for that. I think that there is room to help solve, for some of those issues. And I think that there will be consumer companies that do that well. So like I said, there's some hard tech, applications that might come into play. I hope we're seeing some early signs of excitement around people who are trying things. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I think, again, those are a lot of people who are targeting Silicon Valley types, and I don't think that's the people you need to target. I think it needs to be more widespread, although I do like the pricing that those companies are going for. I think that a couple software things that have gotten us excited, we saw Be Real kind of be a flash in the pan. That was this sort of, new take on social media. And another one that I really liked is a trend is, the most popular consumer app for like Gen Z today is Find My Friends, a default app on your iPhone. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you could never imagine somebody having 24-hour access to where you are.
Nope.
But that's they want that. They want to know that it's like a way of actually feeling where they are authentically, rather than just seeing a highlight on Instagram from a trip that happened a long time ago. But 10 years ago or 15 years ago, you could never imagine getting into a stranger's car or having a stranger into your house.
Yep.
We find out there is a huge market for that. And so I think we see Find My, we see Be Real, we see these people trying to come up with a new device that's a little less villainous than where we've got with iPhone. And so I think we are seeing the early signs of consumer, wave. So people who are able to tap into that authenticity, provide security, and something real is a space I'm excited about. I think too, we're seeing that in experiences and consumer spend. You see Taylor Swift's Eras tour, being bigger than ever. We saw, you can see the Sphere in Las Vegas. Just a new thing to go experience. Yep. And we're seeing, ways to reach mass media, not only in these marquee events, but I think sort of more, populist focused approaches too. Or, there's music festivals now, one that we're really excited about that, not everybody can afford to go to Coachella or Burning Man, and not everybody wants to or needs that kind of like opting. But there are still music fans in Grand Rapids, in Tampa, in Tucson, and they want to go with their friends and have a special time, and they want to do something live. But don't want to travel the world. And so I think
Yep.
finding ways to distribute that marquee experience to folks in a real way that allows them to do something and get talent distributed is something I'm really excited about. So flight to authenticity is what I'm calling it, and it's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I will spread that story. I love the articulation of that principle. And we definitely are at scale looking for ways to connect, to feel that connection. And I really love how you articulate it, because you're looking for that underlying basis of the perception of authenticity. It's something that you feel, right? And like even with the example of Find My, it's almost like without peering in or getting a glimpse into what the perception is, you're able to have a familiarity over a distance that makes you feel closer. So I think it will be interesting to see this shift where, and one thing that we're really big believers in, not building tech for the sake of tech, because there's so much shiny siloed tech that's out there, but really honing in on like, how is this moving the bar forward, or the bar up, or the ball forward for the advancement of humanity? How is it affecting society and community and the earth and this space that we all share? And then what does it actually look like to share that space with each other in a new way?
And I think, the most exciting, tech advancement in consumers is, I think, pretty unquestionably, the advancement of AI under, new LLM frameworks and the sort of architectures they have out there right now, and what OpenAI is doing. And I think it scares a lot of people, rightfully so, not from a apocalyptic perspective, but just from, again, this just inability to distinguish truth and like what makes us human. There is so much AI content now. My older sister is a VP of animation at a major studio that you may know of, and seeing their industry, like, anybody can now make their own content, can make animations on Sora and these other technologies, and I think the onus on them is to work even harder to make real human stories, and to keep the talent inbound and keep the infrastructure in place. So I don't think they're going anywhere, but
No.
I think that the need to present the human experience in a way that is authentic and is intimate is going to grow ever more present.
Yeah, one thing that I found interesting, there was a video that I saw a few months ago where one of the most innovative, groundbreaking companies technologically when it comes to AI, they've got one of the most evolved models when it comes to audio, video, image, text, everything, but they're not using it on a public facing standpoint. Almost no one is going to touch this, only the people that work at the company. They're using it to detect when something is not real. They've trained these models so well so that they can actually seek out inauthenticity.
Wow.
And they're partnering with the government and everything. They're going through the right channels to get this kind of infrastructure in place. And I think that we're going to start to actually see that. It's happening behind the curtains. But I think that we're going to start to seek that sooner than maybe some people think. The value of the human created experience, the human created assets, the actual artwork that's created and crafted with your hands, as opposed to machined or architected with one of these technologies that are out there now.
Yeah, well said.
We'll get there. It's a ride, but I think it always is through trajectories like this. I don't know about you, but I'm very fulfilled with the conversation that we just had. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts?
I'm just excited about a lot of deals we have in the pipeline. If you want to invest with Litquidity Ventures and see what we're looking at, find us on social media, Litquidity Ventures, and shoot us a message or follow Litquidity. We always post surveys. If you're an accredited investor, you can join the syndicate.
Awesome. Website's the best portal?
If you want to, you can go to www.litvc.com. But find us on social. We're funnier there anyway.
Perfect. And we'll drop all the links below and everything like that. Again, Colton, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation and for hanging out with us a bit today. Hope you all enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to tune back in. Got plenty more of these coming. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. I will just mix that up for you. Have a great one wherever you are in the world.
Yep. You too, Andrew. Bye.